You're listening to the Valley Current.
Guy in his home office, you look so happy there.
Thank you. I am.
Look at that. You got plants and everything in there.
Oh yeah. Well, it's all the credit is directed towards Anne Marie because she has the eye for decorating and making spaces feel really lively. I don't know, colorful.
It's beautiful.
Homey.
Well, that's separate from your house, right?
Yep.
You got a little seat there with a bicycle. Is that like an exercise cycle back there?
Oh yeah. No.
Nice.
That
So
we
you
use.
get exercise while doing a podcast. That's pretty amazing.
Sometimes I do sit there on that bike while I'm, working from home and on a meeting. It's nice, it's so important to still get that time in your day to exercise and be healthy.
Right.
It just makes you think better and everything.
Absolutely. And you're living in the beautiful town of Point Reyes, which is the most northern part of Silicon Valley. I'd say not really part of Silicon Valley, but
No.
Silicon Valley is now stretching pretty far, and it's going like even north. Some people say to Santa Rosa, which years ago people would laugh, but in truth, the cost of real estate is pushing companies over the bridge, meaning over the Golden Gate Bridge. Or go over the Dumbarton Bridge if you're on the East Bay. And the Valley is like a whole ecosystem that's most of Northern California. So maybe there is that argument. And you're with a startup that is doing something very special. So tell us a little bit about your journey in getting to the startup, because you got a PhD as well. So you're a very well-educated guy. And you're about to get married, so congratulations. And it's not like you're busy. You got a week left before you're getting married, right?
Oh yes. No,
So we won't make this more than 20 or 30 minutes. But just tell me, what was your journey? Like, how did you end up in California? Because you're Midwestern, right?
Yes, yeah. So I was born in Michigan, and I went to high school and undergrad at Michigan.
Okay.
I got 2 bachelor degrees because I was one of those people.
Yeah, you had to do everything twice.
Oh yeah, I just wanted more school.
You loved it. You're a good student.
Yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed academia, to be honest with you. I like lectures. I like learning, especially when it comes to technology. So my background is plant biology degree and genomics and molecular genetics at Michigan State. And then I managed a lab for a couple of years for a National Academy member. Doug Shemsky is his name. He's retired now, but that was a good chance for me to really refine what my research interests were, because I knew I wanted to go to graduate school, but I also was well aware of how much work it would be. So I wanted to make sure whatever I was doing was something I was going to be motivated to do.
Yeah, you have to pick a topic that is self-motivating. You can't pick something that some other professor wants you to be a drone for him or her, that's for sure. And a lot of the professors think they're entitled to force their students to do stuff like that. And I always say that's wrong. I mean, you got to be self-motivated. You got to be essentially autotelic, really, if you can think about it.
Well, that's a perfect segue to why I chose University of Georgia. So they have a department of genetics that's pretty famous. And that's what my PhD is in genetics. And my advisor, one of my co-advisors, his name is Dr. Rodney Mauricio, and his lab was sort of famous for allowing his graduate students to be very independent. And so that's challenging, right? Like a lot of the time a graduate student comes into a lab, they already have funding. The PI says, here's what your project is, now go and do it.
The principal investigator, the PI, is typically thinking, I'm going to renew this grant. I got to get this guy or gal to write a paper, or more than one paper, that's going to help me with that. And it's all locked into a trajectory of we're building the next 747 or 757 or 767, 777. And you're like, I don't even want to do aircraft at all, man. I want to do like people flying with their own wings. I'm not doing commercial aircraft. I want to do something completely different. Like, you're not in the right place, and you got to do what they want you to do. You're essentially tied to their work, which is tied to their funding, right?
Exactly. And well, with Rodney, it was much more of you get your own funding, you can design your own project and do whatever you'd like. And so that was really appealing to me because I was self-motivated. I had my own research interests and I wasn't afraid of the challenge. So, and interestingly, in that same lab, that's where I met the two co-founders of LeafWorks, doctors Karen Law and Eleanor Kuntz, and because they were also graduate students in that lab. And, you know, we all were geneticists and interested in plants. And it really came back to, you know, all of us interested in sort of medicinal plants. And that directed us towards Karen and Eleanor to found the company. But it's also an important part of the story for why we ended up where we did, which is in the North Bay. So the lab is located in Sebastopol, California. And in that area, in Sonoma County and in the North Bay, there's a very large presence of medicinal plants, but also just the natural products and that sort of industry. So, you know, traditional medicinals is based there, and many other companies just keep starting in the North Bay and keep heading north along the West Coast. And, you know, that what was challenging for that industry and still is very challenging is that if you are going to have a supplement, so say like an herbal tea or something like that, and you say in this tea there's Echinacea purpurea, the FDA requires that you prove that that plant, that botanical, is actually in that product. And for a long time, that sort of testing has been done using analytical chemistry. And that's difficult because, you know, a lot of different plants and, you know, a lot of just ingredients in general can share a lot of these analytes that you're looking for with analytical chemistry. So it makes it messy, especially when products nowadays have, you know, not one ingredient, but they have 40, and there's a lot of overlap there. So, you know, we were always thinking, okay, we can use genetics to ID these species that are used in natural products. And you know, the challenge has always been, well, how has DNA or genetics been used for diagnostics in general? Traditionally, you would do something called a PCR test, but you know that has limitations too because you need really high quality DNA to do that sort of testing. So that's, you know, think of your COVID test. That's a sort of a PCR based test. But a lot of the things that go into ingredients, there's DNA there, but it's highly degraded and it makes it more problematic. So long story short, we're at a really special moment in that whole field where sequencing, where I can just get all the data and I don't have to set up the diagnostic initially just to look for one chunk. I'll just take all the data and I'll process it and analyze it, and I'll be able to tell you what's actually in here. That it's finally gotten cheap enough to do that sort of testing, and that's really
with some AI thrown into the mix, or is it all statistical programming at this point still?
Well, we have done a lot of statistical programming, and there's definitely a component of it that lends itself to machine learning. But whenever I think about stuff like that, I always just think about, you know, junk in, junk out. So if you train a model with poor data, then you're not going to have a model that really works properly. And it turns out that a lot of the public data, which a lot of, you know, think about all the LLMs that are out there right now, they're leveraging public data a lot of the time. A lot of the public data when it comes to genetics actually has a lot of problems. Contamination, mislabeling, there's all sorts of problems that makes it very difficult just to pull that sort of data and use it for a diagnostic like we are doing.
Right. So, there's a real problem. I want to step back for a second, for just a second, because a lot of people don't understand biology. I remember I was pre-med. You don't know the story, but well, first I was going to be a priest. That left when I became a teenager and grew up in the picture. But then, although I was a very late bloomer, but then my parents were like, medical doctor, that's the best thing in the world. You always get a lot of respect. People actually need you. And I had a great doctor. I had a guy named Dr. Strauss, German, heavy accent, German Austrian. And he could do anything. Like I remember, there wasn't any medical problem he couldn't opine on, and he did. And my parents totally trusted him. And he worked out of his home. He had in those days in Brooklyn, New York, and to some degree Manhattan. Your apartment was kind of upstairs. Your house, if you owned a townhouse, your house where you lived was 2-3 floors up. But downstairs, a little garden apartment that was essentially a medical office. So if you were a medical practitioner, you just walked downstairs. Your wife was probably your secretary or nurse. Maybe you had another nurse too. And you'd basically have 2 or 3 exam rooms, and you do kind of this whole process of moving around from one to the other. Probably made a lot of money too, because they kept their overhead way down. And it was no insurance. People just paid in cash, or they brought food. It was a whole bartering system back then. And they loved their doctor. Their doctor was a big part of the community. It wasn't regiment, it wasn't this crazy regiment with all these notes being taken. He might scratch something on a prescription sheet. He didn't even keep a copy of it. Like he just, very simple trust-based system, right? No bills, no invoicing, no receivables, or you paid right then. I mean, maybe there were people that would sign a note or something, but that was rare. And so the point is that she loved him. And my dad, to some degree, although he didn't like paying his bills, but did love him as well. And the bills weren't that big, but to them, they were big. And they were like, you need to become a doctor. The family doesn't have a doctor. No one's been a doctor. No one went to medical school. So I was pre-med. And I remember taking the classes. And I remember when it got to organic chemistry and some advanced biology, saying, wow, this stuff is really sophisticated and really complicated. And then it became like, well, you have to learn advanced statistics for doing some of this stuff. And then I transitioned to just statistics. And then that led to computer science. And then that led to, I really want to go into business. And then going into business became, well, I'm going to go to business school and I'm going to go to law school. And the rest is the story of business and law school. But I did spend some time with the biology books and the chemistry books. And I remember thinking, you really do have to sort of have a deep understanding of stuff that's not visible. Like you're talking about DNA as though you can move these things around. But it's really like a marker. Like it really is sort of a construct. It's not like a bone. It's not like Dr. Strauss wouldn't have studied anything having to do with DNA. He would study about refixing, I broke arms and ankles and a bunch of stuff. He just refixed it in his office and put a cast on. Like he didn't even send to the hospital. He would do everything. So you're dealing with kind of abstractions, I think, in general. And so you're at the abstraction of we can extract, in the abstraction of we can extract from this plant or this other biological material of any type certain information that we can then analyze, which means you have to have a lab, right? You have to have some facility to do it. And then you got to have equipment that actually gives you some newly created data file that you can actually work on. And so you knew that? Did you know all that when you went to Georgia? Like when did it dawn on you? I'm just curious. That's what I wanted to connect the dots of.
Yeah.
Up in Georgia, because you obviously ended up picking the right place to do the work. And you came out with the right degree, and now you're at a startup that wants to be a growth company that's probably just about raising some big money, perhaps. We'll talk about that in a minute, is wanting to do this right thing of add to the world of this abstraction stuff is going to become much more tangible, because that's what you're doing. You're making it like you can read a label now and actually understand what the contents of a label is. And it's not abstract anymore. So when did that first dawn on you, or when did you first see all that? Because I certainly didn't see it when I was studying it.
Well, that's a really great question, Jack. I feel like it's changing rapidly. And so, I went into genetics. I had a class in high school that was just a genetics course. I was always drawn to biology because of very similar situation as you. The assumption was, okay, you go be a medical doctor or a pharmacist or something in the biological field, and you'll make good money, and that's a good measurement of success. And I found it interesting, and I was good at it. And so, whenever I thought about what I wanted to do with my life, it always had to be, I'm practical, so it needs to have an obvious path for a career, but also it has to be something that I found enjoyable, because I know I'm going to spend so much time doing this thing. And the field of genetics has evolved rapidly since the time when I was in graduate school. So I've been living in California now since 2018, and it's completely changed where, they spent what, $1 billion, $100 billion on the Human Genome Project. And that was in the 90s. And now I can get your entire genome for under $100. So
my entire genome. Like literally,
yes.
You can pull some blood. You can pull some blood out of me. Is that the way you do it? Or you use saliva, or what do you use?
Yeah, either or. And I can, the genome being from one end of your chromosome all the way to the other end of your chromosome, all the A, T, C's, and G's that make up you, I could sequence all of that.
Right.
And not to mention, by us being able to do that, because you mentioned earlier, it's something you can't see. Well, there's a lot of stuff that we can't see and measure that we're suddenly becoming much more aware of because of the fact that we can sequence everything. So not only would I get just from a saliva sample from you, your DNA, but I would get all the microorganisms that are in your mouth. I would get potentially what the last thing you ate. Is becoming very, very sensitive in that way. And so I think that the whole field is rapidly changing, where we're becoming much more aware of the fact that there is DNA and RNA, which is basically a cousin of DNA, everywhere. And
so you think the price will keep dropping to the point where people will literally start to be able to regularly send their samples, I guess, somewhere.
Yeah.
And then
yes,
whatever that somewhere is will basically say things are changing. You've changed your diet, you've changed your exercise, you've changed your medications, you've changed this, and you're to some degree maybe even having an impact on your DNA and on your RNA, or is that stuff always fixed in real life?
Well, the DNA, you get some mutations across your lifetime in your DNA, but another way in which people are becoming more aware of the complexity is, I'm sure you've heard of epigenetics,
right,
and
right,
things like that. Yes. And so that is another field where we're able to measure all of that information now. But the real bottleneck isn't in generating the data, it's understanding what the data means. That's the bottleneck. You have to have robust data sets, you have to have databases and pipelines for analyzing all that data and making sense of it. That's the bottleneck.
And keep track of all the papers that are sort of revealing, like it's like an onion that you're unpeeling over time. But tell me about Tell me about the startup now, because you're kind of a co-founder or part of a co-founding or C-suite team that's got a business in Santa Rosa or San Rafael. Where's it?
Sebastopol.
Sebastopol.
Yep.
And what's the name of the company?
LeafWorks. And so I am LEAFVE or LE. How do you like leaf?
Leaf.
Like these beautiful leaves behind me. Leaf.
LEAF. Is that the right?
Yeah.
This is a big law firm, by the way. Leaf, Cabraser, Hyman, and Bernstein.
Oh, really?
Leaf is a good friend. He's getting a little older now. And he's like a multi-billionaire. It's an interesting story. Class action lawyer, smart, early to the game, class action guy. And so Leaf, if you just said Leaf to a lawyer, it would be, that's Leaf Cabraser, that's Bob Leaf. So your company is Leaf, as in the physical green leaf, typically green. Yep. And then what's the rest of it? Inc?
Works.
Oh, Works. Oh, like
kind of like
Works.
Like
okay.
Yeah, like DreamWork, like
DreamWorks.
yeah,
Okay, DreamWorks.
it,
Interesting.
it's
Dream Leaf Works might be more interesting. Leaf DreamWorks, that would be even better, but they'd probably get sued. But so LeafWorks is one word. Is it leafworks.com for people that actually want to
yep,
instantly go there? There are people like that that like instantly go to
yep.
LeafWorks. And you're like a 20-person operation at this point? What's the number of people?
We're somewhere between 10 and 15 people,
Okay.
depending on,
With a,
we have
with a
a lot.
lab, and
Yep,
relatively low cost Sebastopol, which is good as
yep.
opposed to Silicon Valley proper. And you're growing the company, and you've got customers, and you've got revenues, so you've got
Oh,
all the
yes.
things, all the ingredients for growing a company in a field that
Uh-huh.
you think is growing. You think that there'll be more and more need for this stuff, right?
Well, that is very clear that there's a huge need. We have people constantly reaching out to us wanting this service, the ability for us to ID the ingredients they need in their products, because
Right.
they're required, again, by
Right.
the regulators to do this sort of testing.
Right.
And the current model, the current technology that has been out there isn't meeting that need, and it
So
can't
does
deal
it
with
does
a
it
lot of
scale does it scale in the sense that, let's say you got like a 100 new customers, and they all like instantly just bang, like as a result of this podcast, pretend, let's say the
Yeah.
mattress one, 100 different customers start knocking on your door with the equivalent of $1 million worth of business. So you can book
Mhm.
tomorrow $100 million worth of business. Could you actually service 100? Could you somehow press the button that says, "Hey, AWS, we need you to scale up all your servers. We've got this $100 million worth of contracts that we got all these robots lined up. We got the mega factory of the future here. We got Elon Musk as one of our board members, and he's given us a big line of credit to make all this shit happen instantly." Could you actually do that, or is the reality you've got people like you that are scarce, and you can't just instantly tap and say to Georgia or elsewhere, "Hey, send us 10 PhDs instantly"? In fact, we need 100 PhDs because we need a PI effectively, like someone to manage
Mhm.
these 100 new accounts, because they have to be managed properly to deliver quality work. Tell me what would actually happen on that scenario, as rare as it is. But when something like that happens, you have to scale, and some
Yep.
businesses can scale. I think like the robotic stuff that's happening that Tesla
Mhm.
arguably thinks is their way to make billions of dollars and billions of robo-taxis, supposedly going to crank out many, many, many multiples of cars as like a single shell, like bang, 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 single shell construction, no parts assembly, that the whole friggin' thing pops out like a Lego tool. Like that's their theory. I don't know if it's going to happen in real life, but can you do that? Can LeafWorks do that? Like a ginormous factory can do it?
Yes. I mean,
Wow.
I would say, well, first off, I would be the PI of all of these PhDs, and we definitely need smart people coming in still that can help us deal with the complexity. We're testing for everything across the whole tree of life. So we're testing for probiotics, microorganisms, through plants, fungi, sometimes, even animals. So there's a lot of food testing that we're diving into now. So think about fish or shellfish.
So you're saying the 100 different accounts can be as diverse as a marijuana supplier that wants to see what this strain of marijuana, or whatever they call
Yep.
it, hemp,
It could be that. Yep.
and
All the way
versus all the way up to a cow producer saying, "Here's a cattle that we bred, and we want to understand kind of what's coming out of that DNA of that cow." Is that right?
It's interesting you mentioned that, because we also tap into the agricultural sector as well, because they need a lot of this testing, not necessarily for ID of an ingredient, but for identification of what's wrong. Why is my plant sick? What's in the soil? Is this a
Right.
good microbiome for my particular wine is it a special appellation from this region? But ultimately, yes, we definitely can scale. There's automation.
So leaf is a tiny bit misdescriptive or not accurate, because you actually are more like DNA Works, or you're more like
I would say the tree of life has a leaf on it, and that is our
it.
leaf.
But I mean, in general, you're far broader than just dealing with
Oh, definitely.
leaves or even
Definitely.
plant matter. Like you're essentially, I mean, the reason I say this is that
Uh-huh.
whenever you get something that's like horizontally broad, this is business school 101,
Yeah.
horizontally very broad, but you're not sure you can actually scale up to reach the
Mm.
breadth of the market that might hear this podcast or hear your slide deck or whatever they're hearing.
Uh-huh.
And they say, really, can that really scale in a way that turns it into a public company or an acquisition opportunity for like a Monsanto or some big company that really needs this? Or is it much more targeted and specific to a particular submarket or segment that you have to focus on? So, just to
Mhm.
use the analogy of Tesla, it's theoretically a car company, but it really isn't just a car company. It's also a software company. It's also an AI
Yeah.
company. It's
Yep.
arguably a battery company as well, or a power company. It can do lots of things with power or with
Hmm.
power that's non internal combustion engine, ICE power.
Yeah, solar.
Or you can say it's really kind of just a group of smart people that can do a lot of different things and they choose their
Mhm.
market. So now they might be getting out of cars entirely. People are shocked that you can't buy a brand new Model S. They're not making them anymore. You can't buy a brand new Model X. They're not making that anymore. They said they were going to make a Roadster. Actually, the one they did sell is not available anymore. So three different lines of cars, they closed down those lines and they're
Mm.
supposedly making robots on those factory lines. Now they still make a Cybertruck, which they probably should have ditched a while ago. Elon, if you're
Yeah.
listening, it's a message here. But conceptually, they're in the business of making something with a battery and with software. Almost sounds like a
Mhm.
portable laptop computer, except it's got wheels on it or something else on it, like a robot, right? And it has some way to make some productivity happen. So, in the analogy of you having a collection of smart people that understand biology and understand statistics and understand AI and understand how to extract what historically has been hidden, I mean, you're revealing a lot that's been hidden. I imagine there's a big
Oh,
patent
yes.
portfolio that'll come out of this in one form or another. But
Oh, yeah.
where do you think the low hanging fruit is that's the most lucrative fruit in the tree of life? That's a key question.
Well, I
It's a
would say
business.
we
That's more of a
really,
business question. But where do you
yes.
think that is?
I think right now it's in the botanical space, and that's why we're focused on it, because we are uniquely positioned to take advantage of the lack of genetic testing in that space. And it's a major need for these natural product companies. And that's why they're all knocking on our door. And our moat is also built off of the fact that I mentioned earlier, public databases are problematic in many different ways. So the way in which you build up a database that you can say, I can test for X, Y, and Z is that I have confidence in X, Y, and Z. And the way we have done that is we've worked with institutions from across the country, some of the biggest in the world, to get authenticated certified reference material. And now I can develop a genetic test for that particular thing because I know I have that thing right here. It's been proven. And so,
So shouldn't you guys really be almost branding what I would call the new FICO score, but the FICO score is kind of instead of for financial, how good is
mm,
your financial condition as an individual or business? How good is your score? I'm going to call it LICO because it's Leaf is the first name. You
uh-huh,
could call it DECO, but maybe like DICO, like some
uh-huh,
score that's associated with this abstraction that allows a barcode to be put on a label that says, look,
mm,
there's been a certification by this lab. Maybe it's Leaf Labs or DNA Labs. Maybe there's a rebranding that you do, where then you get recognized as the guru or the experts in what gets certified so that gets consumed, what people eat, they feel a little more confident that it's not made with, bad stuff in it, right? Because everyone's aware that the food industry is under attack, rightfully, because they put a lot of junk into our food, and people are getting sick as a result. So you have all these restaurants that have to ask you a million questions about your allergies because they use food that's contaminated, which I have to make mention because otherwise I forget it. It's a funny moment that happened. I was having a pizza and I thought I had some cheese in a bottle because it looked like a cheese thing, and I poured the cheese onto the pizza. It was a beautiful vegan crusted pizza. This happened very recently. And and I thought it was cheese. I even put a bite into it and it was like salt. And I just about spit it out and I ruined the pizza. And I was laughing because I said it was such a beautiful vegan cauliflower crust pizza. It was beautifully made, and it was destroyed by the fact that the restaurant put salt into what looked like, it must have been like a April Fool's joke, into what looked like a cheese flask, like a bottle of cheese. And I took the top off, of course. That was mistake number one, because then I really dumped it on. It wasn't just a sprinkle of salt. And I saw salt on top of it. And I thought, man, what a stupid mistake. And, I could tell some really funny stand-up stories about this because of the circumstances of how this all occurred. But it also ruined, I did the same thing to my salad. I did the same exact thing because I did both at the same time. I ruined both. It was like a moment of, you can just destroy a beautiful meal but with really just even stuff that's natural, like salt, contaminating your food. And we do it all the time. We do it either consciously or unconsciously, or because we're rigged into, that's a bottle of cheese, and man, I'm going to put some cheese on this stuff. And that's a huge mistake. And that happens in real life, unknown to us as the consumers, because even when you read the label, you really understand what all this other stuff is that's on the label. Like, you even look at a bottle of peanut butter. I mean, it's not pure peanut butter anymore. Or maybe you get it right.
Well, so there's two things. One is your second point. There is a tremendous amount of fraud in the food and supplement industries.
Right.
A lot of it's economically motivated. So a good example, at least on the supplement side, is there was this study that looked at cranberries. So you have just like dried up red powder, basically. Right. And they were adulterating it with the red peanut shells?
Yeah.
Like, you open up a peanut.
Want to make it a little more red? It makes it a little more red. Is that what it does?
They would cut it. So it's like, instead of giving you 100% cranberry, I'm now giving you 80%. And
right. It's like the cocaine dealers kind of spicing the cocaine up with salt.
Exactly. Except with something highly allergenic. So that's
that's right. That's right. Because people have peanut allergies. Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. What a mistake. Right.
Yeah. And so,
what's the second point? You said that two.
And the first one was something you brought up earlier about certifications. And so we actually do offer certifications. We will be doing that for the botanical industry and natural products. That I know is a goal as we're scaling right now, because there's so much demand.
Right.
But we offer that in terms of some of the testing we were doing early on at the formation of LeafWorks was to meet the market in California for the cannabis and hemp industry.
Right.
And so of need in that market. So it's a lot of the testing we've done for them is much more agricultural focused.
Right.
So there's this concept of feminized seeds where not to get too sciencey, but cannabis is both male and female plants. The one that's actively cultivated is the female plant and not the males. So there's a way to breed it so that all the seeds you have are feminized or only female. However, like everything, there's an incentive to make, cut some corners to make some more money. That is also happening in that industry. And so we offer a certification where we do have our label on certain products out there that say, yes, we tested these seeds and these are certified feminized seeds. And so there's approaches to that, and I know that we also have that ambition for the supplement, and hopefully food industry as well. There's a lot of opportunity.
So let's wrap up with this question.
Yeah.
You have a couple of other founders. They're both women. They're the CEO and the
ESSO.
Is it, what are they, co-CEOs?
Nope, the CEO is Dr. Eleanor Kuntz, and the CSO is Dr. Karen Law.
All PhDs, all of you in the group. I mean, fundamentally, and you're seeking to bring in more, and you're seeking to raise money to bring in more and bring in more business and so on. We should do podcast number 2 with the 2 of them and you, if you want, or the 2 of them separately, or 3 podcasts, which is in sequence, because it's interesting if you do it the way we're doing it, which is completely spontaneous, no script, nothing. That's the way to do it. Then you really get the view of what do the 3 founders or the 3 people that are running the business. They see the same way. And what I found, and you can offer this to them, that we'll do this in sequence as fast because no prep required. And then I'll let you guys watch your own stories and you can say, we're not actually aligned perfectly, or maybe you are. I mean, it would be shocking if you were, because no one's perfectly aligned. It's very hard. So you get these people. I mean, this is where therapists can do a good job. There are business therapists. There are actually people that just spend their time mentoring startups. On, you guys don't actually see eye to eye on like some really key issues. Like you're not really laser converging. One person wants to go more into plants. The other one really wants to go more into, cattle or who knows what. And then the result of really just a podcast, we don't have to publish it, but we could, is we're gonna actually now focus like a laser, because the one thing I would say, just as a general observation, is the VCs of the world and the super angel firms, and they're almost as big as the VCs, and the family offices, which are bigger than both together, because this could be a family office deal, because they have a longer horizon, is they are totally about, have you identified a market that you can own? Like 100% wrestle to the ground, own it. And then you can like leapfrog that into a next bigger market and next bigger market. And they want to believe that you have figured that out and no one else will be able to get there as fast as you can get there. And I'll just leave that as the question. You can say to your 2 other colleagues, we should talk about that and think about that, because that becomes the real through point of a good podcast about, is there just one really great market? Like obviously Tesla saw it as the car business. I guess they could have started as a robot company. They might be way ahead at this point compared to cars. They started as cars. They built a brand. They definitely have a lot of cars on the road. But now it seems like it may not be cars anymore. But clearly for about 10 or 15 years, it was cars. And maybe it becomes these robo-taxis for a while. I mean, we'll see where this goes, because obviously Elon wants to get to Mars, and I'm not really sure cars really matter on Mars, right? If you think about his whole bonus system for the SpaceX thing that's happening next week, SpaceX goes public. So next week is a big event for him, because he becomes the first trillionaire with a T, the first trillionaire in this war, in this globe, in this system that we're in. That's a mega accomplishment for essentially a guy from South Africa that made his way to California. So let's end here, and hopefully your colleagues will agree. I hope they do, and we'll set it up. Okay. Yeah. Talk to you later.
I just want to say, I already have an answer to that last question of how you leapfrog into.
Don't reveal it. Don't reveal it. Yeah,
just know that I have
the audience hanging for the next podcast.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.